Well, you know when you get introduced as an industry veteran, as I do these days, that you're not going to be doing this for very much longer. So I need to make the most of this. I want to thank BookNet Canada for inviting me, and Sam, especially, who I worked with at the New Press, and who's come a long way since then, and Noah and Sue, who helped me get up here. I want to talk today about a thing called Handselling on the internet, but I'm going to try and do it really through telling the story of all books, and I hope you'll find that story interesting. I think you might, because although there's a lot of talk about what the new publishing might be, in the main it is just talk at this point. And I think the interesting thing about all books is that actually we have tried to put new ideas into practice. And so if I'm going to address some of the great things that have come out of that and some of the difficulties that have come out of trying to do publishing in a way which is completely different from the way that it's been done in the past. I have to say I'm a little nervous about the audiovisual presentation here today because, of course, coming to a BookNet conference, my computer crashed this morning and I haven't been able to get it to work. So I'm on Noah's computer. I think it'll be all right, but if there's some glitches on that, just please bear with me. I think there seems to be a general agreement that contemporary conventional publishing is in some sort of crisis. If you look at the AAP figures that have just come out, they show sales in the US dropping 5.1% for hardbacks, 2% for paperbacks, and mass market is 6.3% down. Figures just came out from the bookseller in the UK, which showed that UK sales were down 3.5%. This is overall sales in the book sector. So you've got a declining market, which, given that it's a sector which is run by very large corporations who are demanding more growth and more profit every year, that's really going to create quite severe problems, I would suggest. Some of the decline that's occurring is because of the introduction of e-books and the lower prices attaching to those, but they're only still 8.5% of the US market, less than $500 million of a $12 billion market. So that isn't the main factor, I think. The main factor which is driving down book sales is falling prices. And it's notoriously difficult, although I did say the Bowker people did say to me last night that they could get figures on this, it's notoriously difficult to pin down exactly how much book prices are falling. But they are falling, and they've been falling for a number of years. And the reason for that is because the big retailers, Amazon and the big box stores especially, are competing with each other on price. The first thing Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, said to his shareholders meeting last year was that what Amazon customers wanted more than anything else was low prices. To get these low prices, the retailers are having to ask for ever greater discounts from the publishers. So the average discounts a decade ago that were in the mid-40s are now in the 50s, 50% of published price. And if you add in promotional money that they often make it difficult for you to refuse to pay, you can be paying 60% of the price of the book to get it in their stores. This puts an enormous strain on the publisher. Following the advice of their accountants, the publishers have been responding by concentrating ever more on what the accountants say is the profitable part of their list, which is the big books. As a category, the big books are more profitable than the mid-list. And the mid-list, as a consequence, suffers because of that. When I was an editor at Scribner 3 years ago, I remember our boss coming into an editorial meeting, I think this was in the fall of 2008, and saying that for the sort of books that I was publishing, 50,000 was the new 100,000 when it came to advances. promotion budgets for the sort of books that I publish, which are mid-list books, have basically disappeared. They don't exist. Review copies are sent out to increasingly fewer review pages. But anything beyond that, there just aren't the resources to do it. Publishers are not being perverse. They just don't have a margin if they're giving that amount of money into the distribution system to do any promotion. This is a real problem today, because without promotion, books will almost certainly die. And the reason for that, well, there are a number of reasons for it, but the main reasons promotion is more important than it ever was, is that there are many, many more books for people to choose from. Again, it's hard to get exact figures on this, but it looks like there'll probably be over 1 million new books published in the US this year, which is just a staggering figure and is probably 4 times what it was 5 years ago. Now, of course, not all of those are trade books. A lot of them are self-published books, specialist books that are just going out to very small groups, you know, maybe perhaps just a family. But they have ISBNs and they're up on Amazon. And there are 300,000 what Bowker calls traditional books. And that's nearly double the number that are published just 5 years ago. Secondly, there are many more things to occupy one's time with these days, apart from reading. I mean, portable electronic devices don't just carry books; they make available games and video too. And also, disseminating one's own writing has never been easier. It seems to me that it's getting easier and easier to write and harder to read. And it's notable, I think, that if you go into cafes where, you know, just a few years ago, everyone seemed to be reading articles or reading books, you go into those cafes now and everyone seems to be writing articles and writing books. So without marketing, this mid-list is really, really suffering. And it's creating a readership pattern, I think, where more and more people are reading the same few books, and more books are being read by tiny numbers of people, with very little in between those two categories. The middle ground is disappearing. And I think that's, I would argue that's not a good thing for readers or for writers, and I certainly don't think it's a good thing for publishers. I think it's causing a kind of pervading gloom in publishing, a sense that things can only get worse before they get better, and an anxiety that, although the problems that the industry faces are apparent, it's much more difficult to figure out what it is that can be done about them. Traditional publishers are stuck with warehouses full of books, floods of returns, large sales forces in the field, retailers who are too powerful to stand up to. One industry executive that I talked to about a piece I was writing for The Nation told me, he runs a large publishing conglomerate in New York, said, "We know we're heading over a cliff, but we can't do anything about it until we've gone over the cliff." And that's not a good place to be. So when John Oakes and myself, my business partner, started talking about creating a new kind of publishing company in the spring of 2009, we decided that we would just start from the ground up, unhindered by any of the precepts of conventional publishing. John had a background running 4 Walls, 8 Windows and Nation Books, and mine, as you've heard, was at the New Press and at Verso and then at Scribner. We knew we were both essentially mid-list publishers. We never published big blockbusters, but we weren't pitching our books at tiny little specialist groups either. We were somewhere in the middle. And so the problem of how we could get promotional spend behind those books was the first one that we addressed. And the model of All Books really flows from that. We decided that the only way we could earn sufficient margin to commit that amount of money, the amount of money we wanted to marketing, was by selling direct at more or less full price. That meant not just forgoing bookstore sales, but also selling on Amazon, because we knew if we sold on Amazon, Amazon would undercut our price and people would see our promotion, which we paid for, and then go to Amazon and buy the book there at a discounted price, the discount having been got from us when Amazon bought the book from us. Selling direct meant that we would lose many of the casual purchasers who might stumble across books in a store, but we thought we could compensate a lot for this lost business by targeting likely purchasers with our promotion. After all, if you're selling a book to Barnes & Noble, say, or Amazon, say a $17 paperback, you're probably giving them $10 a book. That's a lot of money to go out and find a customer. We figured we knew those customers better than they did. We certainly knew the books better than they did, and we thought we could spend that money more effectively in getting customers to do business with us. I'll come to the ways that we decided we were going to market the list in a minute, but let me just tell you about a few other aspects of the model that we've adopted and we've been running now for just over a year. On the production side, we decided we would sell only print-on-demand books or e-books. We're platform agnostic. I mean, you can buy a book for any device, any electronic reading device from us in a format that'll work on that device, or you can buy it as a paperback. We've even done some hardbacks. But we don't print books in advance of having sold them. That's a basic principle. Every book we sell is sold before we produce it. That means we don't have to have a warehouse. It also means that we can't accept returns from anyone. If we accepted returns, they would have to come back to my apartment, which is not a large one. We believe that the industry, which has got on average 40%, in the US anyway, 40% returns rate for trade hardbacks, had, as we put it in our promotional material, that has reached the point of no returns. Print-on-demand books are more expensive, obviously, but when you factor in warehouse costs and the unsold copies resulting from inaccurately forecasted sales, the difference in price is not so significant. It also allows us to produce books very fast. Combined with our direct distribution model, we can put books out into the hands of readers within a few weeks of getting a manuscript from an author. And when we are doing books that relate to current affairs, it's very important to be able to do that, as you'll see with a couple of the examples that I'm going to give you. We also determined that once we decided that once we'd used our promotion to create a buzz around the book, we would try and find a trade partner to put it out into the stores. I mean, obviously our authors want their books in the stores. You can sell more copies if it is in the stores than if you're just selling it online, although at a much worse margin. And so holding out the possibility that through a rights deal with a conventional publisher, done very quickly after we'd put the book out and promoted it very heavily with a decent budget, was something that we thought would be of interest to the authors. It's a bit, so we're sort of operating something which is a bit like the subscription model of publishers in 18th century England. You know, when Rights of Man was published, a group of people came together, put up some money to get the book produced for a kind of core enthusiastic audience who probably knew who Thomas Paine was, and then once the book was going, it was put out as a penny dreadful, and then was banned by George III because it was causing such an uproar. But that sort of subscription model is the kind of thing that we're working towards. Other elements of the approach that we're using include restricting ourselves to a small list. We only do 1 or 2 books a month. I think our general feeling was that there are too many books out there already, and we didn't want to add more than we had to the number. I talked with a friend who's running a small publishing company and asked him how many books he was doing these days, and he said, well, we've actually doubled our output in the last couple of years, we're now doing 150 books a year. And I expressed surprise at that. It's a small company, not a large staff. And he said, yeah, but the thing is, it's getting harder and harder to figure out which books are going to work, and therefore we have to do more in order to be able to be sure that we're going to find some winners. And that seemed to me to be a zero-sum game. I mean, there really didn't seem to be any end to that. We like a situation where we can edit every title ourselves, and we can really think about how we want to publish it, get involved in the promotion and the rights sales ourselves. We aim to sell world rights in our books. We distribute them all over the world. We publish in English all over the world. We've set up relationships with print-on-demand printers in the UK and Australia, so we send the files to them, and they then post the books out locally to customers in their areas. We're hoping that we're going to set up a similar arrangement in India shortly. Another aspect of the publishing company, which is different, I think, from what any other publisher has done previously, is that we have a royalty system where we give our authors a profit share. We pay a basic royalty, but there's a profit share element in it because we really want to get the authors involved in promotion of the books as much as we possibly can. And another thing which is going to help us do that, we haven't actually managed to set this up yet, but we're quite close to doing so, is that we're going to give our authors a live feed into their sales. So they'll be able to see sales as they occur. We decided we weren't going to give them the names and addresses of the people who are buying the books, but they will be able to see where their book has been bought, which state it's been bought in, and how many were bought. And we think that will help them do their promotional work more effectively. So during the Book Expo in May 2009 in New York, we announced that we were going to set up all books, and Publishers Lunch covered a launch party that we had at the Book Expo. It said, what Publishers Lunch said was that in a voyage abundant in metaphors and blessed with sunshine, publishing veterans, there's that veterans word again, John Oakes and Colin Robinson literally launched their new venture, All Books, on an old fireboat from a pier 8 blocks south of the Javits Centre. And so there we were. We actually wanted to see if we could get them to spray the Javits Centre from the fireboat, but they said they couldn't go close enough to do that. And we set up a very rudimentary website, and we put up a video on it, which we shot outside a Barnes & Noble, which had just closed down in Chelsea, near where John and I live. I have to say here, we're taking no pleasure in bookstores closing down. In fact, I was very fed up this bookstore closed down. It's something that I think is a loss to the community. But I don't think that it's anything that can be avoided. It's just a reality that one has to face. And I think that the model that we're using, where we at least are getting a buzz behind the book before it goes into the bookstore, may end up helping bookstores rather than hindering them. But we walked from the bookstore, from the Barnes & Noble, round the corner as we were being filmed, and there was a little graveyard on 17th Street in New York. So we carried on filming there, and here's a little bit of the film. Oh, so let's go back to that. Gravestone right in front of the
RH, that's Random House.
And I think that may be HarperCollins with that rather pre-epic one. I think that might be Simon & Schuster.
Where are we skating?
Well, we're skating into the future, John. I'm sorry about that rather abrupt end there. So the first book that we published under the new imprint was in November of 2009, and it was a book about Sarah Palin, and it was called Going Rouge, which was a critical book about Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin's going to appear a few times in this presentation, and if anyone here is a big fan of Sarah Palin, I'd like to apologize in advance for the treatment that I'm going to give her. But on the other hand, she's actually been very good for all books, so I don't want to be too mean about her. The book got a lot of attention. It came out at exactly the same time as Sarah Palin's book, Going Rogue. Because of the similarity between the name of our book, Going Rouge, and the name of her book, Going Rogue, a similarity that we reinforced with our cover design. Sorry. Yeah, there it is. The possibility of confusion between our book and Sarah Palin's was commented on widely in places like the LA Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, Christian Science Monitor, Entertainment Weekly, NPR's Morning Edition, and even Entertainment Tonight, who, to our absolute astonishment and delight, it's a very, very big TV show, ran a segment on the book, and this is it.
We are all fired up to get to our next argument involving Sarah Palin.
Her new book is called Going Rogue, but now a competitive book with a look-alike cover called Going Rouge. That's about to hit shelves also.
So we want to ask, is this just satire or could it be sabotage? You decide.
Sarah Palin's personal memoir, Going Rogue, won't be released for another few weeks, and already pre-orders making it #1 on Amazon.com. Now, get ready for the release of a book at least one conservative blog site is calling the evil twin to Palin's book, titled Going Rouge. The clever play on Palin's title and almost mirror image cover containing a collection of essays from liberal writers offering stinging criticism of the Republican lightning rod. Going Rouge already drawing support and sharp criticism from various groups, with at least one writer wondering if, quote, some hockey mom-loving conservatives might be confused enough to pick up the wrong book.
So is this political satire or sabotage?
Well, actually, sadly, very, very few Sarah Palin supporting hockey mums did pick up our book. We really didn't sell very many to customers who got confused between the two. I mean, possibly because our book said American Nightmare on the cover and had a dark sky with a lightning flash behind it. However, there was enormous confusion in the media, and one of my happiest moments in publishing was when Fox News ran a very appreciative segment on Sarah Palin's book and illustrated it with our book, which they'd actually made into a hardback, because her book was a hardback and our book was a paperback. Someone in their studio repackaged our book as a hardback in order to show it in this segment. And then, I think best of all was that I then sent that story to the New York Post, who ran on page 6, which is the biggest gossip column in New York, ran a big piece about Fox News's mistake. So you had a situation where the New York Post, which is a Murdoch-owned paper, was poking fun at Fox News, which is a Murdoch-owned TV station, for confusing our book with the lead title from HarperCollins, which is a Murdoch-owned publishing company. I just thought, it doesn't get any better than that. We capitalized on the media coverage for the book by running ads. In those early days of all books, I mean, it was only a year ago, but we thought that all we had to do was to put up ads on big sites saying where people could order the book from, and everyone would come to us. So we ran this ad. And please notice the effective use of lightning in this, extensively on The Guardian and The Nation and on the New York Times. Sorry. Oh. And actually, the great thing about it was that everyone did come to the site, and they did buy the book, and we sold thousands and thousands of copies off the site. It was absolutely great. And we then sold the book to HCI, which was a conventional publisher best known for doing a line called Chicken Books for the Soul, and they put it out within a few weeks of our having released it, and it went on to the New York Times bestseller list, and that was our first book. So we knew it was all going to be downhill from then, and that's basically how it's turned out to be, but still, we'll take it where we can get it. The second and third books we published were by well-known authors in their respective fields. One was a guy called Norman Finkelstein, who writes a lot on, quite a controversial author who writes on Israel-Palestine. And the second was a fiction writer called Gordon Lish, who famously was the editor of Raymond Carver. It was a collection of short stories by him. And so following the strategy of Going Rouge, we put expensive ads up on a few of the major sites, assuming the world would beat a path to our door. And to our great disappointment, we found out that it didn't. Working on the marketing of these books around the internet, we realized that something different was needed. That just big centralized advertising was good to get the book up there in the zeitgeist, but in terms of actually making a sale, it wasn't working in the way that we hoped it would. And what we realized was that the internet comprises hundreds of thousands, millions of individual communities based around specialist sites and listservs and blogs, and that we needed to work closely with these communities if we were going to be able to sell our books and tailor our marketing messages and materials to their specific interests and requirements. That's not necessarily cheaper than running big centralized campaigns. You don't spend as much money on advertising in big publications or television or radio, but it's a lot more labor intensive. And I think this has some bearing on what the previous panel was discussing. We realized if we were going to market our books on the internet, we needed a lot of people to do that. We needed a marketing staff that could really get involved in detailed discussion with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different places that we wanted to promote the books. And it was very, very time consuming, and that cost money. I'll look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. But really what we were talking about there, what we sort of stumbled on was really that we needed to hand sell on the internet. And I just want to talk a little bit about hand selling. It's hard to think of another industry where hand selling has played as major a role as it has in books. If you look up hand selling on Google, it nearly always relates to the book industry. And that's because the product range in books is both very diverse, and also books are quite opaque. By this I mean that the value of an individual book is often not that easy to convey straight away. You may have to read it to know if you like it, or at least to talk to someone who has read it. So booksellers, particularly independent booksellers, have tackled this problem by developing hand selling. And hand selling requires that you both know the books you're stocking and the interests of the customers to whom you're selling them to. Such knowledge allows you to bring the two together, a particular title for a particular customer. And if the marriage is a happy one, then the customer's likely to seek your advice on what to do, what to read when they next come into your store. Hand selling at independent bookstores has been critical in launching a number of books that have gone on to become major bestsellers. For instance, Paul Yamazaki gave me a quote for a piece that I was writing. He's the chief buyer at City Lights in San Francisco, and a great bookseller. And he said, look at books like Amitav Ghosh's Sea of Poppies or Roberto Bolaño's Savage Detectives. These are serious, sophisticated books that began life with modest expectations, but after dedicated work by the publisher and independent booksellers, went on to reach a much wider audience. And it's because hand selling can do that, hand selling by independents can do that, that the large publishers have assiduously courted buyers like Yamazaki to bring them on side at the beginning of a book's life. They can be the petri dish that sets off in which a chain reaction leading to the bestseller list occurs. It's not just the independents that are hand selling. The Associated Press reported in the spring of 2009 that Borders was going to try and organize a scheme by which they would hand sell. It doesn't really seem to me in the spirit of Handselling for a corporate head office to send out instructions to individual branches about what they should be personally recommending to their customers, but that's what they did. The board's vice president for trade books asserted, a bit desperately it seemed to me, there has to be in-house passion. So we're asking our buyers to write a letter to the stores and work with the buyers there to share that passion. It wasn't clear from the statement the boards put out if they were asking publishers to pay for having them hand sell their books, but in any event, the scheme did not last for very long, and as we now know, neither did the bookstore chain. Handselling really only works with independent bookstores because they're rooted in communities. These communities can take two forms. They can be geographical, based on local knowledge and relationships with customers who live nearby, or they can be intellectual. City Lights works with both types of community, the bohemians of North Beach in San Francisco, and those who visit from all around the world because they know that a store founded by Lawrence Ferlinghetti will have books of interest to them. Operating on the internet as we do at All Books, it was difficult for us to capitalize on a geographic community. We pride ourselves as a global publisher, in English anyway, transcending geographical restrictions. And furthermore, as a startup, it was hard for us to immediately draw an intellectual community around us. So we realized pretty soon that we could not become, All Books could not become a destination site like, say, the New York Times or Amazon. We realized that if we were going to sell our books, we had to go to where the communities we wanted to sell them to already were and make the sale in those communities rather than try and get people to come to us. In other words, by the time they came to us, we'd already sold the book to them. And we had to make a site which didn't, we resolved to make a site which didn't have a lot of bells and whistles on it. We couldn't really afford to do that anyway, but was simple and reassuring in its order process. And this is what it, this is, oh, I'm sorry. Oh. I think I might, hang on a second. Just going to jump a little bit ahead here. Can you give me a hand? Sorry about this.
This is Handselling PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's. Oh, I've done it again. I'm so sorry. Go on. What did I do? I just wanted to make it full size.
It's full size on the screen up here.
Oh yeah. Okay. Right. Great. Okay. Yeah. Good. So that's what the site looks like. Nothing very elaborate, but we hope sort of clear and easy to use. We realized if we were going to sell within the myriad communities on the web, we had to restrict the subject areas in which we were publishing. Neither John or I wanted to run a very specialist publisher. We wanted to publish across fiction and non-fiction. The broad precepts that we were operating under were running a cosmopolitan publishing company that was intelligent, politically progressive, culturally adventurous, but not any narrower than that. The sort of model we're trying to operate on is to try and create a kind of Grove Press. When Barney Rossett was running Grove Press in the 70s and 80s and did such a great job with that. That's the kind of feel that we want to try and give to All Books. But it's very difficult to sell across a wide range of areas, to hand sell across a wide range of areas, as this wonderful little video, which comes from the American Booksellers Association on the difficulties of hand selling, will show you.
Excuse me.
Hi.
Hi, I'm looking for a gift for my 12-year-old niece.
Sure. Let's go to the young adult section. Does she like to read?
Oh, she does constantly, yeah.
Oh, great. Does she have any interests or hobbies that you know of?
Well, right now she's really into horseback riding and playing soccer.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. I don't know if she's read these already. Maybe you know National Velvet and Black Beauty, two excellent classic books on the horseback riding for young ladies.
Oh, okay. Sounds
Maybe something like, we got this great dinosaur book with, it's got lots of dinosaur facts, an inflatable dinosaur in there. And,
No, I don't think so right now.
We have a great book, Julie the Wolves by Jean George. Really a great inspirational book for young
No,
ladies.
I think
by
I'm
an
going to
Eskimo
stick
girl
with
who
the
lives
horse books right now.
anything. Well, maybe, Our Bodies Ourselves. It's never too early for a
Thank you.
young girl to learn about her biology. Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. Really a great book. 12-year-olds love it.
Well, what went wrong, obviously, was that he was trying to sell books in areas that the customer was completely uninterested in. So we decided that the only way that we could deal with that problem if we were going to run a general list was to publish in strands. So if you look at the All Books list, you'll realize, although it's quite diverse, it does go across fiction and non-fiction, science fiction, politics, history, culture. There are within it quite specific strands so that we can keep going back to customers with particular interests that we've identified with books that we know are going to appeal to them. And people who've come to trust our editorial standards in that area. We also realized that we would have to build segmented databases in order to get to those people. Databases are very important for the All Books model. We've probably sold about 50,000 books so far, and we've, of course, because we only sell on the internet, we've got 50,000 email addresses. We can't use them all because you can't start marketing to someone just because they bought a book from you. But out of those 50,000, we've been able to create quite a good list of people who are friends of All Books, our most important customers who kind of are interested in the publishing company. But we've also been able to build lists in subject areas, and we are mailing out on those subject areas whenever we have a new book that's pertinent to them. So the first question we ask when we're developing a marketing strategy for a book is, where are the communities who are interested in this book hanging out on the internet? The author's often a good source of intelligence on that front, and we glean information from other books that we've published, and of course we're looking closely at the metrics that we're getting back from the books that we've sold and the promotion that we've done to see where the real nodes of interest are. Although metrics, we thought when we started this that metrics were going to be the solution to all of our problems. In fact, it turns out that we get fabulous amounts of information, and we can make almost no sense of it whatsoever most of the time. That's depressing, but it's true. Once we figured out where the people that we're trying to reach with the book are, we try and present the most compelling marketing materials we can come up with to them. And these can take a variety of different forms. One of the things that we've done a lot of is to use video. Now, a lot of people are using video these days, and I think, I'm on a panel of the Moby Awards, which ran in New York. The first ones were held last year, which are like the Oscars for book promotion videos, and we were swamped with book promotion videos. So I think if you're going to make book promotion videos work, you have to use a bit of imagination. And I'm just going to show you a couple now, which, they are for all books. But I think they do show what a little bit of imagination can produce, actually for very little money. This was one that we did using footage by one of our authors who was on the Gaza Flotilla, which sailed to Israel last year and which was attacked by the Israelis. And it was pretty amazing. She came back. She was the only person who came back off that boat with any video footage. And we put it into a video to sell a book about the attack on the Freedom Flotilla. So this is it. Early morning, May 31st, 2010, the Eastern Mediterranean. 6 boats of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla sailed towards the coast to deliver aid to the Palestinians of Gaza, who have been under an illegal Israeli blockade for 3 years. 700 peace activists are on board, including women, children, doctors, priests, writers and journalists. None carry weapons. 4:30 a.m. Israeli commandos boarding from sea and air intercept the flotilla in international waters. They are heavily armed. Well, that goes on to in a couple of minutes to tell the story of the incident and of the book. This one, the Situationists. I don't know if people know who the Situationists are. That they were a French movement in the 50s who practiced a thing called détournement, where you took some existing media and tried to turn it to your purpose. And I published books on them, and I'm a big admirer of what they do. In this case, we had a book called Rich People Things, the sort of stuff rich people liked, and by an ex-editor of New York Magazine. And so we were sitting around talking about who were the sort of people that his book was about. And he said, well, you know, it's like the people in that party in Fellini's La Dolce Vita. And I sort of vaguely remembered it, but I went and had a look at the scene and thought that would be a great way to promote the book. So, of course, the film's in Italian, so we just re-subtitled it.
È stata una cerimonia bellissima, mesta e commovente. Era il popolo, l'autentico popolo, che portava fiori alla tomba del suo capo abatissimo.
Scusi, io non ho il piacere di conoscerla, sono il terzo genero. Di gran lunga il meno importante, naturalmente. Vuol conoscere qualcun altro della mia famiglia? O ne ha già abbastanza? Nonna? Nonna?
No, ma guardi, lasci stare.
Nonna? Ti presento il signor?
Rubini, molto piacere, signore.
Bravo, bravo. Fa finta di dormire perché non vuol parlare con nessuno. Ora continuiamo a risalire l'albero genealogico. Papà?
And the final one I'll show you is one that we put together by one of our interns put together, I'm returning again, I'm afraid, to Sarah Palin. We produced this for absolutely no money at all, using an off-the-peg program that you can animate avatars with.
Hello, and welcome to Larry King. Barely Live. Today I have a special guest. Sarah Palin, a potential presidential disaster for 2012, and one of the subjects of a stunning new book called At the Tea Party, edited by Laura Flanders, and coming from the pioneering new publishing company, Or Books. Welcome, Sarah.
Or Books are my nemesis. They were the America-hating kooks who brought us that best-selling Going Rouge. You know, the book guys know the title of my book from. I hate them so much I would hunt them down like elk.